Episode 1, what is art philosophy? Is it just thinking pretty, and who gets to define it? So this is our premiere episode, and I'm here with my sister Nicole Sciarone. She is an art theorist, and it took a lot of convincing to get her on here, because this actually started because of a long conversations we've been having about different perspectives and narratives and theories around artwork. And we do not have the same opinion on art and philosophy.
I don't agree how you structure or phrase the stuff when you talk about contemporary art, specifically.
Yeah, so that's how this was born. And so I want to say welcome to the very first episode of the Sciarone Salon, where I, Tascha Sciarone, an art historian and eldest sister of 6, attempt to explain art and philosophy without any fistfights to my younger adult sisters. I'm Tascha.
I'm Nicole.
Yeah. Today I'm introducing my incredibly talented art theorist sister, Nicole, into the deep end of a Belgian philosopher's mind. Nicole, are you ready to have your entire idea of what art is completely dismantled and reassembled?
I went to art school. I have a bachelor's and major, so I don't think master's. So I don't think that will happen. But I'm curious to see what happens.
Okay, this is our introduction episode with art historian Tascha Sciarone and artist and art theorist Nicole Sciarone. Nicole, did you know that the guy who literally wrote the book on how we think about art argued that there's no single right way to interpret it? That it's all a constructed narrative?
Yes, I did know that.
Well, okay, so you do know who Anton van den Braembussche is? Or just the concept?
The concept I know, yes.
Yeah, because that's where we get stuck a lot. We have very, very, very different ways of constructing the narrative.
That's why I don't argue with you. I just walk away angry, because you can have your own opinion and view art however you choose to, and through what lens.
Yeah, that is true. And this is where we're going to get into this. Okay. My own introduction to philosophy was through this book, Denken over Kind, Thinking About Art. My high school teachers at the International School of The Hague tried, but it all felt so abstract. It wasn't until months after my university class when I woke up from a nap with a newly configured brain. That's when most of this philosophy started clicking. This wasn't about finding answers, it was about questioning the questions themselves. So welcome Nicole, and welcome to everyone. Today we're talking about Belgian art philosopher A.A. van den Braembussche and why his ideas are a secret key to understanding not just art, but history, culture, and how our brain works. So Nikki, I'm going to now dive into the biography and the background, and I want you to just interject. I know, because that's what it's about. Like, I can say something, but that doesn't mean that it's the only truth or the hierarchical truth. Just like, did you know, so like with dinosaurs, like we say, like they did that, the main theory of how they died was the meteors, but the third most viable was that they were so big and ate so many plants that they passed so much gas that they destroyed the yeah, but that is the third most viable. Like only like 3% of people say that the viable, or maybe not 3%, but there are theories of how things happen. There are theories and narratives, and then you have to say why those narratives are important. Yeah. So let's get into who is this guy? Anton Albert van den Braembussche was a Belgian philosopher and emeritus professor at the Free University of Brussels, called the FUB. He wasn't just an art philosopher. His big thing was the philosophy of history, how we write and represent the past.
I don't think I know him, but I know most of the stuff that you've been mentioning, but I don't recognize the name. But then again, I'm terrible with names.
No, but that's also why I'm starting with him, is because why we're starting this whole podcast with him, because Dutch and it's written in Dutch or Vlaams, so Dutch and Belgian art historians know his work quite well. But he's also, the way he speaks about it is also how another language, English, is actually like the traditional academic language. And then his ideas get extrapolated into English text. And he's the reason why we look at museums, because that's my area of expertise. How do we construct that narrative, that there are multiple narratives? I mean, we can also say feminist theory as well, and race and class theories also says, you know, multiple narratives are important, that there isn't one single dominant narrative. But he's the one that like took the historical perspective of it so that people understand how we got there. But it's so dry. It's so dry. It's horrible. That's why I needed
Isn't most philosophy texts quite dense or dry or difficult to get through?
Yeah, that's why you need to nap after every episode so that it can configure in your brain. Okay. Is history or an art history textbook a neutral fact sheet, or is it a story shaped by the author's choice, languages, and biases? He argued it's
the second, yeah. Continue.
Yeah, it's the second. He argued it's always a narrative construction. He applied that exact same thinking to art. Is an artwork's meaning a fixed thing placed there by the artist, or is it constructed by us, the viewers, based on our own context and the stories we tell about it?
Both.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll be getting into it more. So Nikki is, out of all my 5 younger sisters, she's the one closest to art theory and academic, but also practicing art. So actually all I'm saying here is stuff she already knows, and I'm really thankful that she's here. But I also want her to interject, because you can't see it, but she's like, I'll have to keep quiet, but I need you to interject.
So... Yeah, no, I will interject, but you haven't said anything that I disagree or need to counterbalance, just the 2 words that I've said so far.
Okay.
Continue.
So he's a historian, an art critic. Oh, no, that's not right. He starts with explaining that there is the artist, the artwork, the public. And then later on, we also have like the artist, the artwork, the public, and also the historical, social, and cultural narrative of the time and a later time that influences it.
I was going to say, because the 3 elements is what that you learn in art school that you need to keep in mind when you create a piece of art, but also historical context, and also, the current debate, the contemporary setting, and then the historical context of the medium that you use.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why he says, like, we're not just going to look at the thing, we're going to look at how we are looking at the thing. So the key concept from then Braembussche is that he gives us the tools to be more sophisticated lookers. The first concept is that there is a narrative construction of meaning. He was influenced by thinkers like Hayden White. This means every historical text or art interpretation uses literary devices. It frames things as a tragedy, a comedy, a romance. This framing shapes the meaning. A critic telling the story of Van Gogh as a tragic, misunderstood genius creates a different meaning than one framing him as a savvy marketer posthumously. Well, you would say then Theo van Gogh's wife was a savvy marketeer. But also Theo van Gogh was an art dealer. So the critique of the second concept is a critique of the meta-narrative. He was always skeptical of big overarching stories that claim to explain everything in art. Like art is progressing towards perfection, or all great art is about beauty. He argued that these were just powerful stories that have been privileged over others. They exclude other voices and perspectives. And I think this is where we usually get boggled down, because sometimes I will choose a narrative and then view artwork through this lens. And I think that's what irritates you a lot, Emma.
Yeah, no, definitely. Because everything you've said so far is also like stuff that I agree with when we look at art and talk about art, and there's nothing to argue with yet. But you don't state, well, it's also not an essay, but you don't state beforehand specifically, I will look at this artwork through this lens. You just say, this is the truth because of whatever lens you're looking through. And then I'm like, that's a perspective you can take. It's a viewpoint you can take, but it's not the only viewpoint. It shouldn't be hammered or emphasized that hard. But then again, if you're writing artist statements or art reviews, or trying to catch the essence of an artist, a curator or a public figure or a viewer or whatever, art lover, whatever they write about it is their truth based on it, and whatever lens they look through it is what they capture with the artwork.
So you would just appreciate it more if you start with, this is the lens I'm using, and this is
Well, yeah, maybe, probably, because then you're it's not as definitive that this is the only answer. Because a lot of time when I talk to you or read pieces that you've read, or when we speak about stuff, you like, no, this is how it is. That I'm like, it's an aspect of it, but like that's not the part that I would hammer on so hard. That's the viewpoint or the standpoint you choose to speak from. So every time you talk about art, it's very biased for me, or it's very black and white. Like you choose a standpoint and then there's nothing else that exists. And then when you try to interject other way, you're like, no, but this played a role. Then I'm like, it does play a role, but it's not the only role. Like you choose to frame it in this way, even though this is part of the story, it's not the only part of the story.
Okay. And is this usually how I talk about art when in the art gallery, in the context of the art gallery? Yeah. No, because that's also what I've realized too, like people outside of the art world that are just casual viewers of the art world, is they want a definitive answer. The moment I start becoming wishy-washy about things, I'm not saying all of them, but for example, when I go with my kids to museums and the other parents that are driving with, they're like, why did the museum supposed tell us several stories about this? What is a definitive? So there's still a lot of people outside of the art world are still in this, oh, we started at the Greeks, after the Egyptians, we went to the Greeks, we went to the Renaissance, and then we went...
But yeah, we're specifically also talking for maybe catering towards children, these texts, or to the general public. So when you have a museum that says, say, it's Naturalis or the Volksmuseum, they have a standpoint from the lens that they look through.
Yeah.
So if there's multiple narratives, then it's part of the educational basis that they make. But if you say have a museum that is only based on, let's say, boy months, like it's just about the cultural setting, the time and place, then like they can choose what they say, like which standpoint to take, or what is important based on the theme of the exhibition, because otherwise you'll write dissertations about just one artwork and still not have an answer, you know. So just like I said, like if you say the framework that you're looking towards it, the museum already has a viewpoint that they decide to show work, and then within the exhibition there's also a theme set, so they speak from that perspective. So that's one way of doing it. But the other thing is, like, I went to Art Rotterdam, I think 2 or 3 years ago, and there was an exhibition. There was one artist's work that I incredibly loved. I almost, on a student salary or on a student's no money broke, bought an artwork that was, I think, 4,000 euros, which for me was the most astronomical price that I could ever think of. He told me I can pay for it in installments. But the point is, the artwork was about genocide. It was literally depicting different sites where genocide has taken place in the past, like in Angola and in different places. But it is the aftermath of the area. So you can't see that this happened anymore, but it is the spot that it took place. He also did some, with the photography work that he did, he added some extra elements that makes it a little bit more blurry. And the concept of the artist was to be like, it doesn't mean that it's not visible anymore, that we shouldn't be talking about it. And he wants, if this hangs above your couch in your living room, that it could incite conversations in the future. So if somebody's like, wow, this is such a beautiful artwork, because I was like mesmerized, I didn't even care what it was about, I just wanted it. But at the same time, if people come to your house and they ask about it, and we'll talk about the artist eventually, and then you will mention it. So these topics will keep coming forward. But I didn't like really push that element of it. It was just like, it's about this, but when you look at the artwork, there's no direct correlation.
Yeah, but then the funny thing is that is exactly how I feel about art. Like, it has to have layers, and it shouldn't constantly traumatize, but it should be open to... It should help have a conversation, like whether it's in your house or in... I think you introduced me to like this feminist art gallery in Norway. About this one artist that like they hand stitched, like that it looked like blood on a underwear, like someone... I was like, have that in your bathroom so that you can have conversations about female reproduction and you know, normalizing that. So I think me and you are on the same page of that. Like, it shouldn't be good art has layers, and if you want to engage with it, you can engage with it.
But I also think, like, depending on what kind of viewer you are, art is viewed differently. Like, when I go to a museum and I look at art, if it doesn't catch my attention, then I don't participate in it. I don't interact with it. There's a lot of artworks that I really love in the Netherlands. A lot of artworks are very much conceptual based. So if you don't interact with them on the conceptual level, you don't see the genius of it. But visually, it doesn't necessarily pull you in. So lots of times when I go to museums, sometimes I really have to like force myself to go read all these different letters, because the exhibition is just letters.
Yeah.
And then when you read it, it's this beautiful, really thick layered piece of art, but it's not for your normal everyday viewer that one doesn't choose to necessarily interact in that way, I would say. Whereas like, I do think you should have different kinds of art, but art should firstly move you. And sometimes you have to spend a lot of energy to read all the things so that it's able to move you. But firstly, it should be able to reel you in by some way visually.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's also when I went on my first art history with the university. I was like, I love art, so I'll look at every single artwork. And then we stopped after viewing 3 or 4 artworks, and then we went to go have like a coffee break. And I'm like, oh, but there's so much more to see, because usually when I came to Europe, we had like a week to see all the art. Just go and see it, and then you can look at it, think about it later. But with my art history bachelor's was like, okay, no, we're going to sit and discuss and talk about it. And even if we don't talk about it, we just need to let it settle. And I was like, why are we just having coffee and, stops all the time? But then someone told me, it's a little bit pretentious of you to think that you can actually see 800 pieces of artwork and bring it to you. You also need to be... My professors would sometimes just go to like 3 artworks in the museum, and then we'd travel an hour and a half to see 2 more other artworks. And it was just the artworks that they enjoyed or had a story to tell. Because of their enthusiasm, it was like a introductory letter, and your enthusiasm grew.
Yeah.
But that's how we get introduced to art. But so what I want to say, how Braembussche, you can see his influence everywhere in modern museums. Like, why do exhibitions, placards now often include multiple perspectives? Why do they question the colonial history of an object? That's directly from the school of thought. It's not about rejecting the past, but about being transparent that history and art history are interpretations, not absolute truths. Because...
just like history is written by the victor, like same with art history, or with any form of history, people choose what they want to be the main narrative. So it's important to have multiple narratives to have a clear depiction of what actually was playing at that time. Yeah,
because up until now we had like this central Western narrative where everything else was a periphery.
Yeah, but even in the central Western narrative, there's also a lot of things being excluded that hasn't been mentioned at all, which also has a very big influence on what's happening at the time and the thought processes and stuff like that. And choosing to exclude something also says a lot about a piece of art or a piece of history. It tells a lot as well. Silence speaks very loudly.
Yeah. So what Braembussche got right is that his biggest strength is democratizing interpretation. He argues that you don't need a PhD to have a valid take on art. Your perspective, your context, your story matters. It empowers the viewer. Because there always has been a barrier to entry into the art world, because collecting art started during a period where it showed your hierarchy in the world.
Yeah.
So all museums are built in this complete other paradigm period where only if you feel comfortable, privileged enough to enter a museum, you will dare to enter. That there are socio-economic barriers to entry. Even if the museum was free, like the Doric columns of some museums or the way the steps go, you're very visible and you could always be asked, what are you doing here? I bring my children to museums, and when people say, well, how can you bring 2 boys to museums? My 2 boys would never. I'm like, I let them lick the floor there. Like,
as long as they don't touch the art.
no, because a lot of Dutch museums are really good for art, so for kids. So they literally can't do any harm in these museums. They are made for children to explore. But so many...
Some museums.
Yeah, but to be honest, my children will leave the museums that are not right. But most Dutch museums, like even the Stedelijk, which is just full of, you know, contemporary art and lights and stuff, have like, hey, go do a dance between the lights. See how if you pull
they have like a educational, or they have like a children interaction set.
In the Van Gogh Museum.
But it's because when I worked in the museum, the biggest like visitors are parents of kids or mom with kids.
Yeah.
Or pensioned people. But it's because you need to find activities to do, so they need to cater to those kind of people.
Yes, but it's completely different in other countries. Like the Dutch museums, like I could not take my children to a Belgian museum, because then you have like on like this pedestal where I'm like...
Well, when I think about it, like in Scotland, when I lived in Edinburgh, like most of the museums I would say aren't kid friendly either. I think there's one that has like accommodates a little bit for children, but not necessarily. I didn't really pay attention to it, but also I didn't see a lot of children.
Yeah, it's most places don't cater, but I will tell you now, the times I went to the TEFAF or the PAN, people do bring their children with. I also brought my children there. There's kids activities at the TEFAF and PAN. And the TEFAF is like one of the biggest European art and antiques fair in Maastricht every year. And the PAN is one of the biggest contemporary art fairs here in the Netherlands. I mean, Beyonce literally and Brad Pitt like private jets to Maastricht for the TEFAF. And there they have like world-renowned artists giving art class.
Can we go to the TEFAF?
Yes, we can.
As a visiting.
Yeah. It's I haven't done it in years.
I have never gone to.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was going to say, like, I think one of my favorite things... Or maybe I this year I went to the Art Rotterdam as well, and I think I enjoy going to the fair more than I like to go to museums. Just in general, because they try to like show the work. Like sometimes they paint the walls green or blue, or they put like a wallpaper up, or they make more of a setting. So sometimes it's also just more accessible in that way, in the sense of like, oh, this is what it could look like in your own house, or like, whereas like in the museum, like art is sometimes also very much more inaccessible. I mean, it's still inaccessible, I think, at our art fairs, but I enjoy looking to it because you know the ideas that you take them home with you. Yeah. Like they're supposed to live longer. Whereas museum works in museums, unless they're like experience-based things, when they're just a painting hanging on the wall, you can admire it and enjoy it, but it's not something you can ever covet it unless you get like a print.
Yeah, no, that's true. Because, so to get back to democratizing art in this way, is there is social and economic barriers to go to museums. And even maybe to art fairs, because we also have to pay these art fairs. Now, as having an art gallery, I know I can email galleries and ask if they have extra tickets. But before this, I was like, before that, I was like, oh, the TEFAF is like 30, 40 euros for entrance tickets.
My friends from art school worked at like Art Rotterdam. They would get us a ticket, but otherwise than that, I couldn't afford going to.
Yeah, but that's the funny thing now that you remember when we went to Frankfurt, you came with me to the art fair. I was like, okay, I don't have a client base in Frankfurt. Now I do. But it's like, okay, what am I going to do with my 50 free tickets? We're like, should we just like go to coffee shops and invite people?
Didn't we do that?
No, what we ended up doing is we gave tickets, like if like Frankfurt is like a financial hub. So if the dad came in, the man came in on Friday night to check it out, maybe with free tickets from his company or something, then we would, and they were interested to show their wives or daughters, or not daughters, but I mean, just one man came back with his wife and daughter to look at an artwork again. We ended up giving them extra tickets so that they can come back and with.
Well, that's one thing that I wasn't being able to do when I was younger, is like go to a museum and re-look at their artwork. And now that I'm a little bit older, have a little bit more money and have like a museum card, like the idea of going back and reviewing a work is especially something that has moved you, like it really, really stays with you. Because with like older museums, that has like a fixed collection. Like if you can go stare at the Botticelli every week, then you will, if you really like that work, and then you can really be moved by that. So I think like being exposed to art more frequently, and also just trying to make it more accessible, is like, because art is something you should enjoy, no matter who says that it's good art. It's something that should bring you joy or move you. And I think everybody should collect art, even if it's like from the flea market and it's €2 and you think it's beautiful. That's your art collection. You should buy it.
Yeah.
And even if you don't feel like you're allowed to buy an artwork, if something is pretty to you, it's so difficult to be so inspired by an artwork that you're like, I need this. That should be enough reason for you to buy it, because when are you going to get that kind of reaction to a work again?
Yeah, no, that's true. But to be honest, we're a little bit spoiled for that, because we have a family that creates a lot of art. Currently, also my partner's offices have the rest of this collection hanging at his offices. Most of the people there don't believe in art. My partner doesn't really believe in art, but he'll humor me. But he is getting the benefits of having art in his offices.
Yeah, wait until you take it away and see what people react after 3 weeks.
I don't know, he is a little bit of a white cube. He asked me just for one thing in our house, just one wall with nothing on it.
Well, I wanted to make an art gallery here because I've been collecting a lot of art. I have a lot of photographs, and I wanted to make like on this white wall here.
Well, Nikki, this is a audio medium, so nobody can see your white wall.
I have one white wall, and I wanted to make a really big, I wanted to fill it with artworks, like old school Salon style from England, where it's from top to bottom, and whatever's in the middle at eye level is like your favorite piece. So I can like mix it up like frequently, because
you love a gallery wall.
Yes. And Tim said no, my partner. He said we can hang 2 or 1 paintings here, but otherwise it's too busy. So we're gonna have to buy a bigger house in the future, and I will have a massive gallery wall that I can frequently put in new photography pieces and stuff.
Now, so I'm gonna also then go on now with the rest of our podcast. We were talking now about the ongoing debate over controversial public monuments. Well, we didn't talk about the controversial public monuments, but we were talking about accessibility and democratizing of art spaces. But we also went to, like, after the Black Lives Matter, we attended, like, okay, what are we going to do with the statues in Rotterdam? We went to go listen to those. The public monuments. One side says it's history, don't touch it. The other says it's harmful narrative. And then Van den Braembussche's philosophy gives us the language to understand this. It's a clash of narratives about what story we want to tell in our public spaces. It's not just about the object of itself, but the meaning we construct around it. So we have to ask not just questions. That's what he's saying. Okay, we also have to ask questions. All the narratives are allowed to be there, but we also have to ask, what are these narratives doing to our, what type of...
Yeah, what kind of influence it has on the public? Like, how does it influence the people surrounding it?
Yeah,
and what effect it has on people. Yeah, because that's the other thing, like with the statues in Rotterdam, it's also like, move them out of public space, or put an equal narrative next to it, so that you can show that there's a dual narrative. Because like a little plaque that says, oh, this is from a really troubling history, that doesn't say enough. Not a lot of people are going to necessarily engage with that thing. So if you have this really prominent colonial artwork, then it's something you're celebrating in public space, and you're sitting around it or interacting with it. So then it's, it feels... I don't think the statue should be broken or anything. I just think we should think about what is important to us now as a society. What is the kind of messages we want to impart on younger generations and on ourselves. I mean, like, the people and the stuff that you surround yourself with has a really big impact on your mental health. Like, people in cubicles and with fluorescent lights get extremely depressed. Like, it has a really big impact on you. And like, one of our sisters is doing a study now about cognitive architecture or interior as well. and how different spaces affects you mentally. And I think that's something we should take into account when we move in public spaces.
Yeah, so that's what we're getting into here in art and art philosophy as well. It's like we have to look at the bigger picture, because the biggest critique of Braembussche was that his way of like all narratives matter, like it's giving a little bit of like all lives matter. It gives us a little bit of a anything goes relativism. If all interpretations are constructed, is one just as good as another? Does that mean flat earth theory of history is valid as a peer-reviewed one? She's mouthing no. And
no, sorry.
Does this focus on narrative and language make us forget the actual real-world suffering or joy that art and history represent? And can we adequately represent trauma if we're always saying it's just a narrative? Yeah, like you were getting into these statues of people from the 16th and 17th century.
Well, what I'm thinking about now is like me and Tim were reading about a place.
Tim is your partner.
In the Ardennes, where in like a foresty area, there's a memorial for people that died during the resistance against, I think, the Second World War. And I think it's literally just white crosses with a small plaque. But they say people go there every year on the day that it happened as like a memorial day. But also when you move to that space, you need to be quiet. Like it's seen as like a sacred space now. So I found that quite interesting. There's not necessarily a lot changed within that space, except that it is acknowledged, and maybe there's a plaque down there as well that like encourage people. This is like an unwritten rule that you should be silent when walking through the space. And I think that is also quite powerful about like commemorating a moment in time. But that's different than for example, the statues of colonialism in bigger cities. But I mean, like, things don't have to be as grand and as pedestaled as that. It could be subtler, like for example this, where it's a silent area. But what is the question?
The question was, can we adequately represent actual real world suffering or joy that art and history represent? Does it make us forget like this anything goes, you know, everyone's narrative?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like you said, like it's equivalent to all lives matter. I think that's a good assumption, but a good explanation. But I do think, like, for example, when you're putting down an exhibition about work that was made, sorry, my voice, work that was made in, let's say, more colonial time, the overall history, the different narratives that played during that time, which there was colonial power, so you need to speak about that, but there's also other social, political, geopolitical issues that play at the same time, and also class and race and blah blah. These things need to be told. So in that case, you want all narratives to play a role, but like the one is not better than the other because they all play at the same time, depending on the artwork and what it's trying to depict.
Well, then I guess you're a really good Braembussche style thinker, because they would say that the response isn't to go back to pretending we have objective facts, but to argue for better and more ethical and more inclusive narratives backed by evidence and empathy. So then, you know, I think both are
more intersectional.
Yeah, and I think both our stances then are like, for example, with the artwork in Rotterdam that is like someone that went to another country and murdered millions of thousands of people and helped with the international chattel slavery of the 16th, 17th century.
But like the issues we had with that is especially because you're only talking one part of the narrative that had direct influence. That's very much war propaganda.
Yeah, and that had economic...
That's a very specific...
Yeah, it had
bias.
Economic benefit for that area, and he was seen to alleviate poverty in that area without, you know, talking about what was the actual harm.
But that's like clearly withholding a lot of information to make yourself look good.
Yeah.
Like, you know, if it's far away from home, you don't see it, you don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
Like,
but also that period of time is like when we put down public art, it's for the next thousands. We're putting it down like the ancient Greeks and Romans did it. It's for like the Pantheon. It's for the next few hundred generations, so that they can remember this, that they can live long. And now we're more like, okay, no, things are transient, things are, things are built and broken.
It could be like in 20 years or in 50 years that the way that we speak about art now is also seen as like very shallow, and it needs to go much deeper than this. We should be able to grow as we continue to try to be more empathetic and more ethical and more inclusive and more intersectional. There should be space for that, but also at the same time, being able to change things frequently also gives you a chance for more dominant narratives to overshadow things as political or social, geopolitical issues ask for them.
Yeah, so
like the rise of fascism at the moment.
And the far right. Okay, but so to get back, what we're actually now saying in this introductory episode is like,
introductory.
Which brings us to our key question: art philosophy. Is it just thinking pretty? And who gets to define philosophy, or what art is good? Van Braembussche says it's not about pretty thinking, it's about critical thinking. And we all get to define it, but we have to actually do the work of, saying why we think this narrative is important, but while holding empathy and ethics.
I agree with that, but at the same time, like, I think this is very important for people that write about art, and like, so for example, in museums or artist statements or reviews and stuff like that. That is important, but for the everyday viewer, this is not necessarily things they necessarily think about. They go to look at work and they like it or they don't like it, and if they like it, they choose to engage with it, and then these things only gets to play.
I think that's the perfect start point. Is when something catches your eye, when that artwork is like, hey, engage with me, go, and engage with it.
Let yourself engage with it, because once again, how frequently does something really spark your interest? That doesn't happen necessarily a lot. So even if it's a painting from your child, or street artists graffitiing on the street, or in a museum, a painting hanging on the wall, or a sculpture, like, if that catches your eyes or your fascination, like, let your curiosity guide you, because you don't have to view everything. You don't have to like everything. You decide what art is good or not good, in the sense of, or if you like something or don't like something. Not even if it's good or bad art. Just you decide if you like something or don't like something.
Yeah, because
as an individual.
I think a good example of this is also, for example, I went with my children to, I don't know which museum. It could have been, I think it was in Amsterdam. Maybe it was, I really can't remember. I try to go to a lot of museums with my children, but my kids watch TV, but they're not allowed watching that much TV, but sometimes it's way too much than is what is actually recommended. But so, because my youngest is like, wow, look, a giant screen where I can watch TV. He went to go lie on the floor, and I obviously had to stay with his then 5-year-old to view the artwork. And so I was watching it and looking at it, and it didn't pull me in at all, but I was forced to be there in the moment with my child. And that is when I started learning how, like, in Rotterdam Botlek, the artwork was about how humans are still doing the most hard work and the most dangerous work. And Rotterdam Botlek, that is like, what's haven in English? Harbor. And how, like, AI was taking over the easiest job, but the hardest jobs were still physically being done by young Dutch and immigrant men, and how this was destroying their body. Like, I had zero interest in this at all going in. Now I'm like so deep into this. Like, did you know that about 8 Dutch people die per day because of undisclosed chemical, exposure from the military to Rotterdam Botlek, and there's supposed to be an oversight.
Where are the canaries? The modern day canaries?
No, because they didn't keep a logbook, even though the company is supposed to force their workers to keep a logbook, so that they know what type of chemicals they've been exposed to per day. But we only have 30 people in the Netherlands actually checking on over 8,000 industry, including like the army, including...
Where are the canaries in the coal mine?
They are there, but they're getting sued by their companies, and we don't have enough government oversight to enforce the rules that are actually there.
Okay, so what is your point?
My point is, I got pulled into this artwork, and that artwork educated me, and now I'm like, people working for Caldeck, anyone I'm meeting, like, do you actually keep a log with the chemicals that you're exposed to every day? Because your company is supposed to keep a log, and if you don't keep a log, and you, like I said, 8 Dutch people die per day because
That's crazy.
Yeah, are technically murdered by their employers, and because there's no logbook of it, the company
they can't sue, or they can't be liable. Yeah, well, it's probably going to be like the Teflon thing that they knew all along, they just didn't say anything, and that will only be resolved in like 20 or 30 years, which is too late. 8 per day. Yeah. But what I was trying to say is like with artwork is, I wanted to say I worked in a museum. I wouldn't say which museum. Probably find it anyway on LinkedIn. I then have to stand in a room for 30 minutes at a go, and then I have to change between 3 rooms every 30 minutes. So for 6 hours that I'm working, I view a room full of artworks for 3 hours, or for 2.5 hours, or whatever. Hour and a half, I don't know, my math is not mathing. The more you get to look at an artwork and like forced to interact with it, the more appreciation you get for it, because you might like it in the beginning, but the more you have the chance to like view it, the more you get sucked in and like, oh, this is actually quite interesting, this is the extra layer, I didn't see this before, then you start thinking about how it was made, and then you're like, oh, this actually took way more time than you thought. I'm like, how was this even possible? How many people worked on this?
That's actually my favorite Dutch historian. Has a whole theory about this, and she calls it green art theory, which is a really wildly misleading theory, because the theory she's talking about is green art theory. That's the name of the theory, but it's actually, the more we view something, the more neurons we attach to it, the more emotions we have to it, and the more we like it. So she showed like in places like, I think it was one of the Dutch cities that did a lot of horse handling, that trained a lot of horses, paintings of horses sold exponentially more. She took a historical view of art being sold in 5 historic big Dutch cities. Her name is Elizabeth de Bouvrier, and this is actually my main art theory that I believe in.
But when you told me that we spoke about cows. In Delft, there's a lot of goose and a lot of ducks, and in Holland, everybody's windows are decorated. And in Delft, most windows either have a duck or a goose or both. Yeah. But like little sculptures and multiple. And I'm like, yeah, because this whole city is covered with ducks and goose. They have multiple gangs, geese and ducks. They have multiple gangs. I'm terrified of all the different geese gangs.
Yeah, I've been attacked by a swan on my lunch break in Delft.
That's not a geese. That's a swan. But anyway, it's so clearly say that
it's a white geese type of thing.
But it's so prevalent. The one thing that they see a lot every day and interact with every day was there were sculptures over it everywhere.
Yeah, and that's like, okay, the more you see it, the more you engage with it. And that's also why I feel like a lot of Dutch people here in the Netherlands are like,
and now I live in a different city, and they don't have, here where I live now, they don't have goose or ducks in their windows. Yeah, like every maybe 10 piles has some cat sculptures, but that's it. Like, it's very prevalent in Delft.
Yeah.
I mean, they're also maybe like older generation, maybe like my grandma's age kind of thing, or maybe just a little bit younger. But yeah, it's very clear that there's a correlation between what you view every day.
Yeah. Yeah. And in Amsterdam, it was like, oh, we love boats.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So So the more you engage with art, the more you'll enjoy art. But that is true this of everything.
Hence why you need a gallery wall.
Yeah, okay. I don't know. I also see something for
One of my old teachers, I really love her artwork, Lisanne Vrijsen.
Say her name again?
Lisanne Vrijsen. I'm not pretty good at saying her surname.
Is that the one we saw in Amsterdam with the rugs? Yeah.
She recently passed away, but one of the artworks she did when she was younger, or like 10 or 20 years ago, is you could buy her artwork for a year, and she took pictures of water stains, and then she would fasten like wallpaper kind of thing onto your wall as one big water stain, but like much bigger than it would normally be, and it would hang there for a year, and then she'll take it away, and then you can decide if you want to buy it. And most people interacted with it so long, they really missed it when it was gone, so then they end up buying the work. But it gives you an opportunity to like rent a work for a period of time so that you can interact with it and see if it is something that you want in your space.
That's like buying a car. They let you drive the car because once you've touched it, you're like, it's mine.
Yeah. Well, I also have a project called Traveling Artwork where we
you work together with other artists.
With the collective that I'm part of, Monday's Collective, where we you send a picture of your living room or wherever you want the artwork to hang, and we select an art piece out of our catalog to hang in your room. You get surprised, and then it hangs there for 4 weeks, and then after the 4 weeks you get surprised by a new one based on the feedback that you've given on this piece. We've sold a few pieces like that, but also got a lot of feedback of like some people like what they like or don't like about an artwork. They're like, it was interesting to have this in my house, but I don't want it.
Yeah,
and it's like, at least you've been exposed to something and you thought about something, and you have a chance to decide if you really want to spend money to have something.
Yeah. So I think then the question we now have to pose our audience is there a piece of art, a song, a movie, or a painting that you've always interpreted in your own way, regardless of what you were supposed to think? Or has a museum label ever completely changed your perspective? Send us an email at the Salon@gmail.com, and that's the Sciarone, Sciarone, and then Salon, Salon @gmail.com, and we will read your stories in the final 2 episodes. So next time we're continuing on this path laid out by Braembussche, because you might not know this, but this podcast actually had another first season, which will now be the 3rd season. We started with looking at female philosophers, but after several 6-way calls, we decided to lay out a proper framework as an introduction. So this first season is all about the basics, in conversation, as we learn more about things when it happens because we learn more about things when they happen in conversation. The first 4 episodes will drop at the same time and are just the groundwork. And episode 5, we will look at how different philosophers you might know or not know shape how we have historically looked at different art, music, and literature. We will then weave the impact of these philosophers' philosophies on our arts and how they in turn shaped other art, including our cartoons, the way we understand politics, and the way we enjoy museums, theaters, books, and movies. Thank you for being here as the most art-educated sister for the first one.
On paper. I don't know how much my other sisters have done on self-study. Also, like, we didn't fight.
Yeah, but that's because of a lot of groundwork that was laid here last week.
No, I think just because of the structure. And basically you're just talking and I agree with everything.
Yeah, because this is just the basic, and at the end of the day we're all this far in the basics. But what I've learned with a lot of people that are outside of the art world, or they're still usually 70 years behind the current art theory or way we're looking at art.
Because it's inaccessible.
Yeah, because it's inaccessible.
Yeah, but like you said, it's important to talk about things. In conversation is when you learn the most. And also with philosophy, that's where you get to, you know...
Yeah, I had a really smart friend...
Ping-pong ideas.
Yeah, I had a really smart friend that told me that the best way to learn is in conversation. Because then you can ask, hey, what does that mean? I don't get that. Because just having this information shoved into your head, like I said in the top of this episode, it really took me several months after finishing my art philosophy course on this book. that I literally one day woke up and I was like, ooh, my internal brain was restructured.
I think with my master's, there was a lot of crying and a lot of deadlines, just because there were so many deadlines. I think for the first year and a half or 2 years, I don't know what I learned. And then one day I was like, have all this knowledge to talk about and stuff. It needed time to really like find a place to sit.
Yeah, exactly.
But like, yeah, I was a complete idiot like a year and a half after, like in shell shock from how intense our work course load was and everything we learned, and it didn't find a...
No, it's the same as learning to read and write. Your brain is fundamentally shifted and changed. Being an analphabet is the Dutch and Afrikaans word for, but being illiterate, the moment you become literate, your brain brain structure is so fundamentally different. We can actually see it like in scans. And that's the same what happens with philosophy, is that it fundamentally at a stage rewires your brain. That's why you have to get a lot of different philosophies, and then you sort of choose which one ethically, morally you like to view the world. And that's the crazy part, is there is no right or wrong philosophy. There's just a dominant philosophy. And at this moment, like for example in the Netherlands, usually the dominant philosophy in art is like we love realism. But that also ties politically into the starting myth of the Netherlands, that, from the 17th century, that was the moment, we rose above all else.
I have artist friends and I'm from the contemporary art world, not from art history. So my viewpoint of what is interesting, what people want, is from a different demographic as well, probably a much smaller demographic as well. So yeah. I would be like, fair enough. I mean, that could be an answer that you say, but
I'm absolutely not into realism.
I mean, I like it. I just don't want it. It's beautiful. I have appreciation for it. But I want to go to a museum and I want to have like a multi-sensory experience, or a very quiet room where you can sit down and view art, but like you don't have really a lot of seating in most contemporary museums.
No, but what I do like about it, for example, Dutch museums and also like the museums in London and in other places, is that I usually don't ever spend more than an hour and a half in a museum, and then we go have coffee and tea, because you're actually mentally exhausted from everything you've seen, because it's a lot of ideas. I'm like, okay, the coffee and tea isn't the like, because a lot of people tell me like, oh, Tascha, sorry, I'm a cultuurbarbaar in Dutch, like a barbarian when it comes to culture. After a while, I just need to go drink something. It's like, no, that's normal. The most important part is consume and let it settle. Because
even if you leave and you're like, I really thought that one artwork was super stupid. Like, why the hell was that hanging there? Like, having that opinion is also a good opinion. That also incited some emotion in you.
Yeah. So thank you guys for being for the first episode. And again, if you want to write to us, tell us that this was silly, something we missed, that you loved my sister's hair, whatever.
Audio-based medium.
Okay, audio-based medium. Go look up a photo of Nicole's hair. Sorry, you're not allowed to say that. Only I am. At the Salon@gmail.com. And please tell all your friends and family if you enjoyed this show.
Like, share, and subscribe.
Yeah, like, share, and subscribe.
Oh, I feel so dirty saying that.
Yeah, so dirty. Yeah, but our youngest sister said she's not going to be part of this.
It's not necessary.
Okay, bye-bye.